In our hyper-connected, constantly communicating world, silence can feel like a lost art. We're encouraged to share, to opine, to react instantly. Social media algorithms reward constant engagement, and the pressure to always have something to say can feel immense. But what if the greatest strength, the most potent tool for navigating life with wisdom and tranquility, lies not in speaking, but in knowing when not to? Ancient philosophy, particularly Stoicism, understood this profound power of silence. Stoics like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca weren't necessarily men of few words, but they deeply valued intentionality. They saw speech as a powerful force, capable of building understanding, fostering connection, and promoting virtue, but equally capable of causing immense harm, fueling conflict, and eroding inner peace. For the Stoic, the goal is eudaimonia, human flourishing, living a life of virtue in accordance with reason. This pursuit demands constant self-awareness and deliberate action, or sometimes deliberate inaction, and mastering the art of silence is a critical component of this practice. It's not about suppressing yourself or becoming passive. It's about exercising rational control over one of our most impulsive faculties. Today we delve into the wisdom of the Stoics to identify 6 crucial times when staying silent is not just beneficial, but essential for cultivating your inner strength, maintaining your integrity, and living a more virtuous life. These moments aren't weaknesses. They are demonstrations of profound self-mastery. Let's explore when and why silence becomes a Stoic virtue. 1. When overcome by anger or strong emotion. The first, and perhaps most critical, time to embrace silence is when you are feeling intense anger, frustration, or any powerful, overwhelming emotion. Think of the classic image, someone seeing red, the blood boiling, the mind clouded. This is precisely when the Stoics would urge you to pause, to retreat inwards, and to remain silent. Why? Because when emotions run high, our rational faculty, the logos, the divine reason that Stoics believed resides within us, becomes clouded. Epictetus, a former slave who became one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, often emphasized the importance of distinguishing between what is in our control and what is not. Our initial emotional reactions might feel automatic, but how we respond is within our control. Allowing those raw emotions to dictate our words is a failure of that control. Consider the physiological impact. Anger triggers a fight or flight response. Hormones like adrenaline flood your system, making rational thought difficult. Your focus narrows, your ability to empathize diminishes, and your impulse control weakens. In this state, words spoken can be impulsive, cutting, and deeply regrettable. They often lash out not at the actual cause of the emotion, but at whomever is present, or even at abstract targets. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome and author of Meditations, constantly reminded himself of the need for rational self-governance, even amidst the immense pressures of his position. He wrote about the importance of pausing before reacting, of examining impressions rather than assenting to them unquestioningly. He knew that speaking in the heat of the moment often meant speaking falsehoods, misjudgments, or simply saying things that, once uttered, could never be unsaid, causing lasting damage to relationships and one's own reputation. He advises in Meditations, when you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger. This suggests that the energy consumed by anger is better directed inward towards self-reflection, rather than outward in verbal attacks. Silence, in this context, becomes a space for this crucial inward turn. It is a deliberate act of withholding verbal judgment and reaction, allowing the emotional storm to pass or at least subside enough for reason to re-emerge. Seneca, another prominent Stoic, wrote extensively on anger in his treatise De Ira, on anger. He described anger as a short madness. He argued that it is inherently irrational and destructive, not only to the person against whom it is directed, but also to the one experiencing it. He advocated for delaying any response when angry. No great thing is done suddenly, he wrote. Giving yourself time through silence allows the initial impulse to cool. It provides the space to consider, is my anger justified? Is this the right time and place to address the issue? What is the most rational and virtuous way to proceed after I have calmed down? Holding your tongue when angry doesn't mean suppressing the feeling indefinitely. It means preventing that feeling from spilling out destructively. It means choosing to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This silence is a shield, protecting both yourself and others from the fallout of uncontrolled passion. It is the first step in reclaiming your rational mind and acting in accordance with virtue, rather than being enslaved by fleeting, intense emotion. It's the wisdom of letting the wave pass before you try to navigate the sea. 2. When you lack sufficient information or understanding. The second time wisdom dictates silence is when you are uncertain about the facts, lack a full understanding of the situation, or haven't fully considered the implications of what you might say. This relates directly to the Stoic virtue of wisdom, the ability to discern truth, to understand cause and effect, and to make sound judgments. Speaking without adequate knowledge is the antithesis of this virtue. In our age of instant information and rampant misinformation, this is a particularly relevant challenge. We often encounter headlines, snippets of conversations, or partial reports and feel compelled to weigh in, to form an opinion, and to share it. The Stoics would caution strongly against this impulse. Epictetus emphasized the importance of examining our impressions before accepting them as true. He stated, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he is intent on teaching." This applies to learning the truth of a situation before speaking about it. If our mind is already made up, if we are eager to voice our pre-formed opinion based on incomplete data, we shut ourselves off from potentially crucial information and deeper understanding. Consider the dangers. Spreading misinformation, voicing opinions or facts you haven't verified can contribute to the spread of falsehoods, potentially harming reputations, causing unnecessary worry, or leading others astray. Making hasty judgments, forming judgments about people or situations based on limited evidence is unfair and often inaccurate. Stoic justice demands fairness, and fairness requires a thorough understanding. Gossiping or spreading rumors falls squarely into this category. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to look beneath the surface, to understand the true nature of things rather than relying on superficial appearances. Appearing foolish, speaking confidently about something you don't fully grasp inevitably leads to mistakes, contradictions, or being corrected, which undermines your credibility and demonstrates a lack of intellectual humility. The Stoics valued reason above all. Acting rationally requires gathering sufficient evidence and engaging in careful deliberation. Silence in this instance is not ignorance, it is the pursuit of knowledge. It is the discipline of withholding judgment until clarity is achieved. It is the active process of listening, observing, and seeking to understand before committing oneself to speech. Think of Socrates, the philosophical predecessor revered by the Stoics. His famous declaration, "I know that I know nothing," wasn't a statement of despair, but a recognition of the vastness of ignorance and the prerequisite for true learning. By acknowledging his own lack of knowledge, he opened himself up to inquiry and genuine understanding. When faced with a situation you don't fully grasp, the Stoic response is to gather information, to ask clarifying questions if appropriate and possible, and to listen more than you speak. If clarification isn't possible, the wisest course is often to reserve judgment and refrain from commenting. This restraint demonstrates intellectual integrity and respect for the truth. It prevents you from becoming an unwitting agent of confusion or injustice. Silence here is the quiet confidence of knowing that true wisdom requires understanding, not just assertion. When engaged in a pointless or unproductive argument, third on our list, knowing when to disengage from arguments that are unlikely to lead to any positive resolution. The Stoics recognized that not all debates are created equal. Many are exercises in ego, misunderstanding, or futility. Engaging in these serves no virtuous purpose and often detracts from more important pursuits. What constitutes a pointless argument? Be arguments based on emotion, not reason. Similar to our first point, if the other party, or even you yourself, is operating purely on emotion, dogma, or personal offense, rational discourse is impossible. Trying to win such an argument is like trying to rationalize with the wind. But debates where the outcome is indifferent. Stoicism teaches that external factors, reputation, winning a debate, convincing others, are ultimately indifferent. They don't contribute to our core virtue. If the sole aim is to win or prove oneself right, rather than to seek truth or mutual understanding, the argument often becomes pointless. Seneca warns against arguing merely for the sake of argument. He who has subdued himself will have the world at his feet. This mastery includes choosing battles wisely, or often not choosing them at all. Our arguments with individuals unwilling to listen. If the other person is not genuinely listening, considering your points, or willing to change their perspective, continuing the discussion is futile. It becomes a monologue, or worse, a shouting match. Epictetus advises, first say to yourself what you would say, then, if it appears the same things do not allow you to go on, then write. This implies a deep consideration of what needs to be said and whether it's even worth the effort. If the listener is unreceptive, the effort is wasted. Arguments that damage relationships. Sometimes winning a point comes at too high a cost to a valued relationship. Stoic philosophy emphasizes our interconnectedness and the importance of justice and kindness towards others. If an argument is likely to cause lasting resentment or damage a bond, silence and a strategic withdrawal might be the more virtuous, albeit difficult, choice. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on the nature of human interaction and the prevalence of difficult personalities. Yet, his approach wasn't to engage in endless verbal battles. He focused on his own duties and maintaining his inner composure. In Meditations, he writes, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." This applies equally to speech. Instead of arguing about what is right or true, focus your energy on embodying it. Choosing silence in these situations is not weakness, it's strategic wisdom. It conserves your energy for pursuits that align with virtue. It prevents you from getting entangled in negativity and frustration. It demonstrates self-control and respect for your own time and mental resources. It allows you to step back, observe, and perhaps find a more opportune moment or method to address the issue, or to simply let it go entirely if it holds no true importance for your character development or ethical obligations. This is the silence of the strategist, conserving strength for battles that truly matter. When your words would cause unnecessary harm to others. This is perhaps the most ethically charged reason for silence, deeply rooted in the Stoic principle of justice and the concept of oikeiosis, the idea of natural kinship and extending our concern progressively outwards from ourselves to family, community, and ultimately all of humanity. All of humanity. Speaking words that inflict unnecessary harm violates this fundamental principle. This category primarily encompasses gossip, slander, malicious gossip, detractio, and cruel or contemptuous remarks. The Stoics believed we are fundamentally social beings, part of a larger cosmic city, the cosmopolis. Actions, including speech, that damage this social fabric are inherently irrational and vicious. The gossip and slander, spreading unverified, negative information about someone behind their back, is toxic. It damages the reputation of the person being discussed, often unfairly, and it corrupts the character of the speaker and the listener. It creates division, suspicion, and mistrust. Marcus Aurelius, despite his power, cautioned against judging others harshly and seeking to understand their motivations rather than engaging in idle, negative talk. He understood that true assessment requires careful consideration, not hearsay. Cruel remarks and insults, language intended to demean, humiliate, or inflict emotional pain, serves no constructive purpose. It stems from a place of ego, insecurity, or a lack of empathy. Stoicism teaches us to treat others with fairness and respect, recognizing our shared humanity. Seneca, in his letters, often stressed the importance of kindness and forbearance. He understood that harsh words like sharp weapons inflict wounds that can be difficult to heal. Choosing silence in the face of wanting to lash out insultingly is a direct application of Stoic justice. To revealing confidences. Betraying trust by sharing private information entrusted to you is a violation of integrity and harms the individual who placed their faith in you. The Stoics believed that virtue is the sole good. Vices like malice, cruelty, and injustice are fundamentally harmful to the soul. Engaging in harmful speech corrupts your own character, regardless of whether the target of your words is present or aware. By choosing silence, you refuse to participate in the degradation of another person's character or well-being, and crucially, you protect your own. Consider the power of listening. Often people gossip or speak harmfully because they feel unheard or seek validation through shared negativity. By remaining silent, you refuse to provide that validation. You break the chain of harmful communication. This silence is an act of courage, the courage to refuse participation in vice, even when it might seem socially easier or momentarily gratifying. It is also an act of justice, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every individual, even those with whom we may disagree or be frustrated. It is the silence of integrity, safeguarding both your own soul and the well-being of the community. When seeking external validation or boasting, the fifth time Stoic wisdom encourages silence is when the impulse arises to boast about your achievements, seek praise, or fish for compliments. This practice directly confronts the Stoic ideal of self-sufficiency, autarkia, and focusing on inner virtue rather than external validation. Stoicism teaches that true good resides only in virtue, in wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. External factors like wealth, health, reputation, and even the praise of others are considered indifference. While some indifference might be preferred, like health over sickness, they are not essential for a flourishing life and should not be the basis of our self-worth. When you feel the urge to boast, what is usually driving it? Often it's a desire for external validation, a need for others to acknowledge your worth, your success, your intelligence. This reliance on outside opinion is a vulnerability. It makes your sense of self-worth dependent on factors beyond your control, namely, the perceptions and judgments of others. Marcus Aurelius frequently cautioned himself against seeking the applause of the crowd or being swayed by fame. In Meditations, he writes, "It is not the man who does things that is the only one to be blamed, nor he who enjoys the praise, but he who makes it his business to be praised." The pursuit of praise itself is a distraction from the real work of living virtuously. By choosing silence instead of boasting, if force internal validation, you practice relying on your own assessment of your actions and character based on your adherence to Stoic principles rather than seeking external confirmation. You know you did the work, you acted virtuously. That is its own reward. Avoid arrogance. Boasting often comes across as arrogant and can alienate others. It suggests an inflated sense of self-importance. Silence, conversely, can project humility and quiet confidence. Maintain focus. Chasing praise distracts from the task or achievement itself. It shifts the focus from the quality of the action to the reaction it generates. Stoic practice requires focusing on the action itself, performed with virtue and reason. Preserve dignity. True accomplishment doesn't need loud proclamation. Its value is inherent. Silence allows the accomplishment to speak for itself, or better yet, allows you to move on to the next virtuous action without needing applause. Seneca advised focusing on inner worth over outward appearance. Virtue is wholly sufficient for happiness, he argued. If your happiness and sense of self-worth depend on others praising your achievements, you are building your house on shifting sands. Silence, in the face of the urge to boast, is an act of strengthening your inner foundation. It is a quiet assertion that your value comes from your character, not from the opinions of others. It is the silence of contentment, finding sufficiency within. 6. When you have nothing substantive or constructive to contribute. Finally, the sixth crucial time for Stoic silence is simply when you have nothing meaningful, constructive, or necessary to add to a conversation or situation. In our desire to be seen as knowledgeable, engaged, or agreeable, we often fill silence unnecessarily. The Stoics valued thoughtful contribution over constant chatter. This isn't about remaining silent when injustice needs speaking out against, or when offering comfort or sharing knowledge is required. It's about recognizing that not every moment requires verbal input. Sometimes the most valuable contribution is to listen, to observe, and to allow the conversation or situation to unfold without your added commentary. Why is this important? The value of listening. True understanding comes from listening. By remaining silent, you give others the space to express themselves fully. You gain more information, better understand perspectives, and show respect. Epictetus famously said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This highlights the imbalance we should strive for. Allowing space for others, your silence can create space for quieter individuals to speak or for deeper reflection among the group. Filling every pause can dominate a conversation and stifle contributions from others. Contributing verbally should ideally serve a purpose. To clarify, to offer a unique insight, to ask a pertinent question, or to provide necessary comfort or support. If none of these apply, silence is often the best option. Demonstrating wisdom, knowing when not to speak, is a sign of wisdom and self-awareness. It shows you are not speaking for the sake of speaking, but because you have something valuable to offer. It suggests discernment and thoughtfulness. Marcus Aurelius often practiced deep introspection, spending time in quiet contemplation. This internal dialogue is essential for understanding oneself and the world, and it requires periods of silence. Musonius Rufus, another significant Stoic teacher, emphasized the importance of choosing words carefully. He believed that speech should be useful and beneficial. We should never speak unless the thought has been carefully examined, he might imply, echoing the broader Stoic emphasis on reason. If examining your thought reveals that speaking would add little or nothing of substance, then silence is the rational choice. This practice requires humility, the recognition that you don't always need to be the center of attention or the primary contributor. It requires discipline, resisting the urge to fill empty space with noise. It is the silence of the thoughtful observer, the attentive listener, the person who understands that sometimes the most profound contribution is simply to be present, attentive, and receptive. It is the silence that allows wisdom to grow, both within yourself and in your interactions with the world. Conclusion: the power of intentional silence. So, we've explored 6 crucial times when the Stoic path calls for silence. 1. When consumed by anger or strong emotion. 2. When lacking sufficient information or understanding. When you have nothing substantive or constructive to contribute. Mastering these forms of silence is not about being quiet all the time. It's about making speech intentional. It's about recognizing that our words have power and choosing to wield that power wisely. It is about cultivating the inner citadel of the mind, where tranquility is maintained not by controlling the external world, but by mastering our own impulses and reactions. The Stoics understood that a life lived in accordance with nature and reason requires discipline in all things, including speech. By practicing these forms of silence, you strengthen your virtues, virting, by seeking understanding before speaking and avoiding rash judgments. Widing, betemperance, by controlling emotional impulses and the desire for external praise. Courage, by resisting social pressure to speak, by standing firm against harmful speech, and by facing difficult truths internally rather than lashing out. Justice, by treating others with respect, avoiding harm, and valuing truth over personal victory. Integrating these practices takes conscious effort. It requires pausing, reflecting, and asking yourself, is speaking the right action now? Is it rational? Is it virtuous? Is it necessary? Is it necessary? Often, the answer might surprise you. Start by focusing on one area. Perhaps notice when you feel anger rising and consciously take a breath, choosing silence for a moment. Or pay attention to conversations where gossip arises and practice refraining from participating. Small, consistent steps build mastery over time. The ancient Stoics knew that true strength often lies beneath the surface, in the quiet discipline of the mind. By embracing the power of intentional silence, you can navigate the complexities of life with greater clarity, resilience, and peace. You can build your character, strengthen your relationships, and live a life more aligned with reason and virtue. Which of these times for silence do you find most challenging? How do you practice intentional speech and silence in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found value in this exploration of Stoic wisdom, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more insights into philosophy and personal resilience. Remember, the world is noisy. Your inner voice, guided by reason and virtue, holds immense power. Choose wisely when to speak and when to listen to the wisdom of silence.